Hi, I'm Laurajane Smith. I'm a Professor of Heritage and Museum Studies at the Australian National University, where I'm also the Director of the Centre for Heritage and Museum Studies. I am the editor of the International Journal of Heritage Studies. I have been editing that journal since late 2009. The journal was founded in 1994 by the geographer Peter Fowler, and it is engaged in heritage studies in a broad sense in terms of looking at heritage as a cultural, social or political phenomenon. And we encourage papers that look at the idea of heritage, the consequences that heritage practices, however that may be defined, have in wider society. It is an interdisciplinary journal, so we take papers from geography, archaeology, social psychology, architecture, tourism studies, media studies, a whole range of different disciplinary backgrounds. The one area that, however, that we do not publish in is conservation and technical studies about the conservation of heritage. Those sorts of papers are published in the Journal of Cultural Heritage, which is a very different journal than the International Journal of Heritage Studies. Okay, so it's a very, as I said, it's an interdisciplinary international journal, very broad. You know, we have a very broad readership, and then we take papers in from a very broad interdisciplinary and disciplinary context. In the submission process, the journal undertakes a double-blind peer review. That is, you submit a paper that is been anonymised, and we send it out to at least 2 reviewers. So it's blind peer review. The authors don't know who the reviewers are, and the reviewers don't know who the author is. And we think that is highly important to ensure a rigorous and systematic review process. I try very hard to encourage and use reviewers who I know are constructive, who are not gatekeepers, who will give constructive and supportive feedback to authors. And, you know, over the more than a decade now that I've been editing the journal, I think we have built up actually quite a significant cohort of constructive reviewers. So when you submit a paper to the journal, it goes out to review. We aim to try and get the reviews back and a decision to an author within 60 days. That doesn't always happen because sometimes a review can be late for a whole range of reasons. Generally, when a paper has gone out for review and come back, there will be requirements following the review for revision. It's very, very rare, extremely rare that a paper sails through review with no revisions. So it is very important to understand when you get that paper back and it's asking you for revisions, to not panic. It's normal. And the most important thing to do is to engage with the review process and to address the reviewer's concerns. I'll come back to in a moment. And then once you think you've done address the paper, address the reviews sufficiently, you resubmit. If the paper had a recommendation of major revisions, it will generally go out to re-review. If it's minor revisions, I then make a decision, but major revisions will go out for re-review. Again, we try to get it back within 60 days. And so the process goes on until either I or the reviewers think, yep, this is ready for publication. It then goes to the publishers, Taylor and Francis or Routledge, and basically they're very quick. A paper, once it's been accepted, will generally you'll generally get proofs back within a couple of weeks to check, and once the proofs are checked, it will then be published within, again, another week or two online, and a paper will be queued for a hard copy publication. At that point, generally at the moment, there's a 2-month waiting list before it gets into hard copy print. but a paper will be published online almost immediately and open to the readers of the journal. So it's all very, very quick. So tips about publishing in general and specifically for the International Journal of Heritage Studies. Okay, so for my first tip is when you are developing your paper, thinking about what, thinking about your research and how to communicate it, identify at least 3 or 4 journals that you want to publish to and list them in your priority. Then do your research on the journal. Check that what you want to do actually fits within the scope of the journal. And if it doesn't, then move to the next one on your list. But keep a list of journals in your mind, because if the worst happens and you submit to the journal of your first choice, it gets rejected for whatever reason, because you haven't actually done enough sufficient research and it doesn't fit the scope, or the reviewers have rejected it. Don't despair. Go to the next journal on your list. Use the reviews that you've got from the first submission, rework your paper, submit it to the next one on your list. Okay. So that's my first tip. Always have a list, and don't worry if you get rejected. It happens to all of us, okay? For a whole range of different reasons. Doesn't quite fit the journal. It wasn't quite ready as you thought, whatever it may be. Don't despair, rework the paper, send it to another journal. Okay, so having checked out that you've got the right journal, and that you think, yep, this research is going to fit the particular journal that you've chosen, or excuse me, the International Journal of Heritage Studies. Be very clear in how or very considered in how you write your abstract. Your abstract actually is everything. A lot of people, you think the abstract is something that, you can do last minute, or just some additional painful thing you have to do. The abstract is really important. From an editor's perspective, the abstract is what I rely on to, in the first instance, decide whether or not the paper fits the scope of the journal. I will go and look at the rest of the paper, but the abstract is my first port of call. And then I will use the abstract to help me find reviewers. So the abstract needs to be clear. It needs to identify your topic. It needs to identify the methods and the data, or the data that you're drawing on to develop your paper. And it needs to identify what the paper is going to argue. A good academic paper will always be structured around a developing argument. So get a sense, be very clear, write a very clear abstract. What is the topic? What's the paper about? What data are you drawing on? And above all, what the paper will argue. I mean, you can even say this paper will argue blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's really important. Then choose clear, good, relevant keywords, because again, an editor will use those keywords to help them find reviewers for the paper. And you want to make sure that you're doing the best that you can to signal to the editor what sort of reviewers you need, what the topic is, who are to help them identify who is going to be best to review your paper. Take time to edit the paper for clarity. Whether you're coming from an English-speaking background or a non-English-speaking background, and you're publishing in an English-speaking journal, it is really important to edit your work. I get all my papers edited for clarity. One of the things that happens all too often in academia is that we get really tied up and interested in our research. We know what we're saying when we write our paper, because we're so engaged with what we're writing, and it's not always clear to your reader as it is to you. So I always get other colleagues or to read over my work, as I do for colleagues of mine, and then I do get them edited for expression. And it's really important that you do that. And I know it can be expensive, but take the time to edit your work, even if it's just running it through Grammarly or some other editing process, to make sure that it reads well. Because something that doesn't read well will influence the reviewers, whether they intend to be influenced by that or not. It will influence them, and especially a poorly expressed abstract will turn potential reviewers off, and you don't want to do that. So take the time to edit. When you get, as I was saying before, when you get when you submit your journal as article and it's been reviewed and you get inevitably a either minor revision or major revision or even reject and resubmit, don't panic. All of us, that happens to all of us. Take a deep breath, have a look at what the reviewers are saying to you, and basically follow what they're saying and resubmit. One of the biggest reasons that people don't get published in the journal is that they don't resubmit. And this is particularly the case with women. One of the big issues for women academics is that you think, oh, well, I wasn't good enough, I won't resubmit. No, just rework the paper, do what the reviewers are saying, and resubmit. It is, and it's, it is sometimes possible that reviewers will totally misunderstand what you were trying to say, and you think, well, what's the point? Or I disagree with what that reviewer is saying because they've misunderstood. Rather than rejecting what they're saying there, just think, okay, they've misunderstood. How do I clarify what I'm trying to say so that such misunderstandings don't happen again? So rework it for clarity, to avoid the misunderstanding that you think the reviewer might have, and rework the paper according to the points that the reviewers have identified, and resubmit. The vast majority of papers that resubmit may either sail through all right or get sent back for a little, no, you haven't quite done it, we need a little bit more change. Persevere, because you keep on resubmitting, you will get that paper through. Okay, that's the important point. Another point is don't argue with the editors. The editor is there to help you. If they have sent in the paper back to you for resubmission, they think that there is there's something about the paper that has potential. The editor is there to help, but don't take your frustrations out on the editor, because most of us are not paid enough to deal with that. So be positive. Think about how can I make the paper better? And when you resubmit, whether or not the journal has asked for it, we do in International Journal of Heritage Studies, but whether or not the journal has asked for it, include a report of what you did. What you did in response to each of the reviewers' points, because that helps both the reviewers and the editors think about, how much work have they actually done here. And that's a very useful point. The review process, the last point I'd make is that submitting an article and the review process is very challenging. We're putting ourselves out there. We've put our heart and soul into writing something. We're putting it out there and we're getting critiqued, and that's hard. One of the things that they used to tell me and I used to tell my own students is develop a thick skin about this. Don't take it personally, but that's hard. Of course, we're putting ourselves out there, and of course it's hard and it's sometimes hurts, and that's okay. We all feel like that. The point is, take a deep breath, go, right, sit back, take some time away from the paper, and then come back to it and think, okay, the review process is about trying to make my paper better. How can I make my paper better? How can I express what I'm trying to say with greater clarity? And I know my papers have benefited greatly from the insights of reviewers. it's a painful process, but it's a process that works. Have faith in the process is, I guess, what I'm saying to you. Different publishing houses, different journals within the same publishing house will use different online systems. Each of them have their own quirks. Each of them have bits that you think, oh, that's quite easy and makes it straightforward, and others you think, oh my God, what are they asking me? Or you get in, that inevitable loop when but I've done that, I've hit that button, why isn't it advancing? So yes, we use at International Journal of Heritage Studies, we use the Scholar One system. As an editor, I find it very useful, but I know authors don't always. So read the guidelines on the submission process, persevere. If you are having problems with the submission process, and some people do, there will always be a help button, and you can rather than contacting the editor who can't actually help you in this sort of logistical area, contact the help desk that you will find on whatever submission portal you're using, because they will come and help you, because the publishers want the submissions. It's their business. They want those to happen, so they will be quite helpful, as I've found in my experience. So don't hesitate. Don't give up and go, oh God, it's too hard, and then have a tantrum at the editor. I've had that quite a lot. Don't give up. Just go to the help desk and ask for help, and they will help you get the paper through. Some people submit papers as they would have written them within, as they would have formatted and referenced them within their own disciplinary context. You can do that. You can submit if you like, and not worry about changing it to the journal style until you know you've been accepted. However, I don't do that. I look at a journal that I want to submit to. I look at their formatting, how they lay out their articles. I look at the referencing guide. All of that will be on the submission portal, and I follow it. So if I don't normally use footnotes, I use the Harvard system normally from my disciplinary background. But if the journal is calling for footnotes, then I reconvert it to footnotes. Or if it's using a slightly different style in the Harvard system that I'm used to, then I will redo that style. It's important because it shows that you're professional and that you're serious about submitting to the journal. And it may seem like a little thing, but editors do notice that. Submit to the style guidelines that will be on the journal's webpage or on the submission portal. Don't give up. Just keep persevering.